We're going to ask the Lord to bless the service. Brother Rick Hatley, if you'll ask the Lord to bless the service, please.
Chasing the high life, trying to satisfy my soul. All the lies I believed in left me crying like the rain. Then I saw lightning from heaven, and I'll never been the same. I'm gonna climb a mountain, I'm gonna shout about it. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom, I found a friend of Jesus. I am a child of love. I felt the sting of the fire, but I saw you in the flames. Just when I thought it was over, you broke me out of the flame. Hallelujah. I'm gonna climb a mountain, I'm gonna shout about it. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom, I found a friend of Jesus. I am a child of love. Nothing can change the way you love me. Nothing can change the way I belong to you. Yes, I do. Nothing can separate. Nothing can change the way you love me. Nothing can change the way I belong to you. Yes, I do. Nothing can separate. I'm gonna climb a mountain. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom. I am a child of love. I'm gonna climb a mountain, I'm gonna shout about it. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom, I found a friend of Jesus. I am a child of love.
If you've been walking the same old road for miles and miles, if you're hearing the same old voice tell the same old lie, if you're trying to fill the same old holes inside, there's a better life, there's there's a better life. If you got pain, he's a pain taker. If you feel lost, he's a way maker. If you need freedom or saving, he's a prison shaking savior. You got chains, he's a chain breaker. We've all searched for light of day in the dead of night. We've all found ourselves worn out from the same old fight. We've all run the things we know that just ain't right. But there's a better life. There's a better life. You got pain, he's a pain taker. Feel lost, he's a way maker. You need freedom or saving, he's a prison shaking savior. If you got chains, he's a chain breaker. If you believe it, if you receive it, if you can feel it, somebody testify. If you believe it, if you receive it, if you can feel it, somebody testify, testify. If you believe it, if you receive it, you can feel it, somebody testify, testify. You got he's a pain taker. If you feel lost, well, he's a way maker. If you need freedom or saving, he's a prison shaking savior. If you got chains, well, he's a chain breaker. If you need freedom or saving, he's a prison shaking savior. If you got chains, he's a chain breaker.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to see all your smiling faces. Brother Bill, I'll say you got the best looking face in here. It's my favorite. Good morning, everybody. We've got some birthdays this week. Most importantly, not most importantly, but, you know, extra special, Miss Sandy will be 25 on Friday. Happy birthday, Miss Sandy. We hope you have a great day. Mr. Dale, you better make it feel special. Every day, don't you? You do it every day. You can't even. No. And Miss Sylvia will be having a birthday this week, or today. Happy birthday, Miss Sylvia. Be sure to tell her for us. All right. Next Sunday, July 31st, we will have services here. Following services, we will go down to Eva Beach and have baptism. If you would like to be baptized, see Brother Ray, Pastor Ray, this is Pastor Ray, or Miss Cindy Anderson, and they will help you get that taken care of, get you signed up so that we know who to expect and what to expect. But please do come down if you're not going to be baptized and support those who are, show them your love of our church. On August 7th, we will have the fellowship worship prayer night at Brother Ray and Miss Mandy's house at 4 p.m. Bring your finger food and come hang out with us, and we'll have some worship services by our wonderful worship team. On August 14th, the youth gatherings that we skipped July, of course. Many of you know because of all the people being out of town. But we have the youth gathering. It'll be at the Overflow Church in McKenzie, so our teenagers will be attending that. It'll be at 3 o'clock on August the 14th. August 21st, we have reserved the large pavilion at the Eiffel Tower Park. We will set up there for the kids. They can go to the splash pad, And there's many other things for us to enjoy if the adults want to come and you want to send your kids over to the splash pad and come hang out. Of course, dress appropriately. No showing of the skin. We are representing our church. Thank you for that. Miss Barb, you can do whatever you want to do. I'm 100% fine with that. All right. If we could all stand. And we're happy to have Stephen McKee home this Sunday and his very handsome young men back there, SJ and Carter. We're glad to have y'all home. All right. Brother Bill, as the best looking man in this church, can you ask the Lord to bless the offering while Landon and Briley Fullerton come take up the offering? Thank you.
Were all your riches in this world? Are they in diamond rings or pretty pearl? Do you hold them tightly to your chest? Like you got it all, there's nothing left. Well, there's a secret to this life, you know. You see earthly things, they come and go. Let me tell you what stays tried and true. And what you take from here is up to you. Well, sometimes the mountains are lower than the valleys. Sometimes the things you choose will never suit your needs. Sometimes the road you're on ought to be a lot less traveled on. It's all in what you're standing on your feet or on your knees. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Sometimes you're beaten down and badly bruised. And you think you lost this one for sure. Yeah, you gave it all, there's nothing more. Take a tip from a much wiser man, and soon enough you'll understand. Forgive the ones that's done you wrong. It's the path less worn we all should walk. Sometimes the mountains are lower than the valleys. Sometimes the things you choose will never suit your needs. Sometimes the road you're on ought to be a lot less traveled on. It's all in what you're standing on your feet or on your knees. Sometimes the mountains are lower than the valleys. Sometimes the things you choose will never suit your needs. feet are on your knees.
I'm standing at your door. My heart is calling yours. Come fall into my arms. You're weary from it all. Been running for too long. I'm here to bring you home. I'm reaching out. I'll chase you down. How dare you to believe how much I love you now. Don't be afraid. I am your strength. We'll be walking on the water, dancing on the waves. Look up and lift your voice. The future's open wide. I have great plans for you. Oh yes, I do. Your past is dead and gone. Your healing has begun. I'm making all things new. Oh, I'm reaching out. I'll chase you down. I dare you to believe how much I love you now. Don't be afraid. I am your strength. We'll be walking on the water, dancing on the waves. Dancing on the waves. Can you see us just dancing? Whoa. I set every star into place so you would remember my name. I made it all for you. You are my masterpiece. You are the reason I sing. This is my song for you. Every star in the sky, I set every star into place so you would remember my name. I made it all for you. You are my masterpiece, and you are the reason I sing. This is my song for you. I'm reaching out. I'll chase you down. How dare you to believe how much I love you now. Don't be afraid. I am your strength. We'll be walking on the water, dancing on the waves. We'll be walking on the water, dancing on the waves.
The weapon may be formed but it won't prosper. When the darkness falls, it won't prevail. The God I serve knows only how to triumph, and my God will never fail. No, my God will never fail. And I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. And I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. There's power in the mighty name of Jesus, and every war he wages, he will win. And I'm not backing down from any triumphs, 'cause I know how this story ends. Yes, I know how this story ends. And I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. emotionally may not be strong, Lord God, and feeling down, feeling out, God, I pray, God, Lord, that be lifted up in their spirit, God. I speak peace over their life and joy come up from the inside in the name of Jesus. God, I give you all the glory, honor, and praise in Jesus' name. Amen. Yeah. Thank you, Ray. Love you too, bud. How's everybody doing today? We're all good? Yeah, you guys happy to be here on a Sunday? It is. I will tell you one thing. So I came from Florida, and I was thinking, man, it's really hot in Florida. Like, it's hot. I forget how hot it is here. Like, I came up here, and I was like, I didn't think it could be hotter than it was down there. Like, it's humid down there, and it's hot. But up here, there's no breeze. So it's just hot. There's no wind going through there, so there's no cooling off. It's just, and I sweat. And SJ's looking at me. He's like, Dad, why do you sweat so much? And I was like, buddy, it's just, he was like, I don't sweat that much. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I sweat a lot. What do you want me to tell you? But anyway, I definitely sweat a lot more here. I forgot how hot it gets in the summer. And when I got over there and I was working at Mom's house yesterday, and the AC wasn't working. It was 90, or day before yesterday. It's 90 degrees, and I didn't even realize I'm just moving. But it was just dripping the whole time I was there. And then I look at the AC, I'm like, well, no wonder why. It's 91 degrees in here. So I can't escape the heat for any reason, right? I also forgot about chiggers. Yeah. So that's another thing that, you move away from the country and you forget about some of those things. I'm over there piddling around with all them cars back there trying to figure stuff out. And then last night I'm like, oh, come on. And then it's all, it's not terrible, but it's enough that I remember what they feel like, It's funny the things that you forget about when you leave a place and then you come back and, some of those things are pleasant and some of those things not so much, And big horse flies and all that good stuff, right? So I thought we had big bugs in Florida. They got big bugs here too. All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about a couple things. The reason why I reached out to Ray was because I was actually going through some podcasts with the kids, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. I drive a lot, sometimes 2 hours to get to somewhere, sometimes an hour, but it's a lot of driving. I put about 40,000 miles on my truck in 18 months, and I'm not a truck driver. I just drive a lot. So I listen to a lot of podcasts and books and things, and I was like, all these podcasts I listen to, I never really look to see if there's any podcasts for kids, and learning, things like apologetics and things like that. I never really, so then I'm sitting there looking through things, and I found one that was talking about the story of, with Ananias, in the book of Acts. And it was funny because I sat there and I was listening to that story. What they did was they acted like, because it's a kid's thing, so they acted like they went back in time. And when they went back in time, they met somebody, and the first person they met, they were trying to find a disciple of Jesus, and the first person they met just happened to be Ananias, of all people, and he was like, yeah, I know that guy pretty well, So it was just cool because the kids were listening to it, and I was listening to it, and I got a little bit of a, just a message there, and I was like, okay, well, that's a start. So I didn't think much about it until I went to church the following Sunday, and she's talking about the same thing. And I was like, okay, well, that's a start. Again, that's just two things. And then later on, I went to open up my Bible app, and the happened to be the story that was there the next week was around the same thing. So I was like, okay, so there's obviously something here. You're trying to tell me something. What is that? So I reached out to Ray, and I said, hey, if you need a break for the week, I can come in and just give you a little time off. I know how it is every week preparing for something and having to teach every week. In my job, a lot of what I do is teaching. I get up in front of people. I talk for 6-8 hours a day for 2 or 3 days. So sometimes when somebody's like, hey, would you like me to take onboarding for you for this week? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Please do. Because talking for 7 or 8 hours is exhausting. Talking up here for an hour and a half is exhausting. And then after you come from up there and then down here, you don't realize how much it takes it out of you. That's why Dad always took naps, and I never wondered why he was taking naps in the middle of the day. I'm like, it's 2 o'clock. What do you need a nap for? But a lot of naps, right? How about you, Ray? You take a lot of naps? Sometimes. All right. So what we're going to be looking at today is we're going to be looking at listening to God. And I'm going to be talking about the process that people go through in the Bible when listening to God and how some people follow a certain process and some people kind of stray away from that process a little bit. And what we're going to look at is just times in your life. Think about times in your life where you asked for something. Maybe you asked for something from God, or you prayed about something and he gave you an answer that maybe you didn't like and you didn't want to do it, right? Because it just didn't make sense. You're just like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I know that's not God talking, that's somebody else. Maybe it was. And then you go and do something else, and meanwhile, he's trying to bless you in a way, or trying to bless you in this path, and you don't do it. And then what happens is over time, the more that happens, the more you start to get further and further away, because you start to get kind of ashamed of what you didn't do. And it creates a gap, and that gap just keeps growing. Okay, so in the book of Acts, we're going to be looking at chapter 9, verses 10 through 18. We don't need to stand. We'll just go through it, all right, unless you guys want to stand. But do we have the up on the screen, Patty? There we go. So
9, 10 through 18. So this is Saul's baptism. This is where, if we're talking about Saul going down the road to Damascus, this is where Jesus revealed himself to Saul. But before that, during that process, God spoke to Ananias through a dream and said, hey, I need you to go pray for this guy, right? So look at that first thing. There was a disciple in Damascus named Ananias, and the Lord said to him in a vision, Ananias. He replied, here I am, Lord. Get up and go to the street called Straight. The Lord said to him, to the house of Judas, and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul, since he is praying there. In a vision, he has seen a man named Ananias coming to him, placing his hands on him so that he may regain his sight. Lord, Ananias said, I have heard from many people about this man, how much harm he has done to your saints in Jerusalem. And he has authority here, from the chief priests, to arrest all who call in your name. But the Lord said to him, go, for this is my chosen instrument, to take my name to the Gentiles, kings, and Israelites. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. And then Ananias went, right? So the first thing you want to think about is when God tells you something, and a lot of times you don't like what he's saying. There's many people in the Bible that had this happen. Jonas was one of those. Moses was one of those. That as soon as God said, this is what you're going to do, they were like, but wait, right? So who's got kids in here? Anybody got kids? So if you don't have kids, you've at least been a kid. Unless you're Randy. Randy's probably been an adult his whole life, right? But everybody else in the church at least has been a kid at some point. And you can remember like when your mom told you to do something, or your dad, the first thing that comes out of your mouth, but, right? So the first thing we need to think about is removing the but from our lives. Everybody's got a but, right? And usually it's got a smell to it, right? So let's remove those first. Let's take those out, because that's typically where the first thing starts, is because you're thinking, you've got God, the creator of the universe, and your Savior, and died for your sins, and did all this stuff. And he asked you to do something. The first thing you say is, but. What do you think's going through his mind at that point? Really? But I can understand where Ananias is coming from here, right? So put yourself in his shoes for a second. So here's Ananias, and he's told to go pray for Saul. And we all know the history behind Saul. We all know what he was really good at. He was really good at hunting Christians down and either stoning them or putting them in prison or whatever the case may be. He was very good at what he did. And he thought that he was doing that for the glory of God. He thought he was in the right. So he was just as driven as they were, because he didn't know what he didn't know, right? So here's Ananias, and I can just imagine him being like, wait a second, so you want me to go to the guy who kills people like me and say, I'm going to pray for you? And he's thinking, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard, right? That'd be like Ray here saying, God told me to go to Afghanistan and lay my hands on the Taliban. And he's like, what? No, they put people on TV and murder them on TV. There's no way I'm doing that, right? But it's a similar situation. But how many times if you think about your kids and you tell them to do something, the first thing they say is but. And in your mind as a parent, you're like, I know what's best for you. Like, I know things you don't know. You need to listen to me, right? So right here, where did Ananias say that? Where did he go through and he said, but God, we know this man. Like, we know what he does. What happened? God said, yeah, that's not the point. That's not what I'm telling you. What I'm telling you is he's going to be an instrument to further our kingdom. We all know that Paul eventually became one of the greatest disciples in the world, paved the pathway for how you do that job, right? So first thing we got to do is what? Get the but out of the way, right? Stop saying but every time God tells you to do something. Okay, the second thing we're going to do is, so think about, again, let's talk about kids. I like kids because I've got 3 of them, and you guys have seen most of them. But if you think about kids, what is like when you ask a kid to go get something out of the refrigerator, right? And you're like, hey, go grab this out of the fridge, and they come back and they say, I couldn't find it. How many times does that happen? Or go grab something out of the closet. How many times does that happen? They come back and they're like, I don't know where it's at. I couldn't find it. And you're like, really? I've gone to the point where I've told my boys, look, go to the second drawer from the bottom all the way to the right in the corner. That's where it's at. And still, they come back, I can't find it. And here's the thing. Here's the point is, sometimes when they go and they look in that fridge, they look at everything here, and they don't move anything out of the way. Or maybe they open that drawer, and a piece of paper had shuffled over the top of what you said where it is, and they don't move it out of the way, so they can't see what they can't see. And they're not looking through things, right? But in this story, what Ananias doesn't know is something that God knows. What did God do to Paul? or Saul at the point. What did he do to him on the road to Damascus? He blinded him. Ananias doesn't know this at this point. He just knows that the guy's there praying, and he doesn't know that something has happened to him and that Jesus spoke to him, and came to him on the road, and he's worried because he can't see what he can't see. But understand that, number two, you got to remember that God sees all. It's 3D vision. He's looking, under things, on top of things. Carter, my son, for instance, if I tell him to sweep the floor, right? I'm like, hey, sweep the floor in the kitchen. He's like, okay, and he's all peppy, and he goes in there and starts sweeping. Then I go back in there, and what do I find on the floor? There's crumbs everywhere. And I'm like, dude, I thought you swept the floor. He's like, I did. And I'm like, well, what is all this? And so I'm like, okay, do it again. So he does it again. I go back in there, and I move one chair, and where's all the crumbs at? Under all the chairs and the table. Why? Because he doesn't move things out of the way. He just sweeps around things, and that's because he goes after what he sees. What he doesn't understand is that a lot of times God sees things that we don't see. So you're missing blessings a lot of times because you're not doing something that you were asked to do because you're worried about what could happen. It could be finances. It could be other reasons why you're worried, but you're not doing it because of that. And Ananias could have missed out on a huge thing if he decided to do something like Jonah did and decided to go to a whole other place. Maybe he'd have got eaten by a whale too, but either way, he could have missed out on possibly changing the life and helping to change the life of one of the worst people for Christians during that time, right? Does that make sense? So when we go down to the next point here, and when we're thinking about how God works, we have to understand God sees all things, right? Past, present, future. So just because you don't think it's going to work out or you think it's something that just doesn't work for you, understand that he knows. He's sitting there telling you, I can already see this. I see this working. It's already working this is our plan. Why do you keep questioning me? Why do you keep going back and saying but all the time, right? So we have to understand that as we come up across these problems or we come up across these things where God's telling us to do something that doesn't make any sense, many times we need to understand that he sees things that we don't. And that's important, right? So moving on to number 3 here. And number 3 is a big one. So I work in the fitness industry, as you all know. And a lot of the things that we do in the fitness industry have to do with sales, right? So I had this guy I was interviewing one time. He was from Georgia, real good country boy, and I was interviewing him, and I said, okay, so go ahead and pitch me on something, pitch me on sales. He was like, well, let me tell you about these 3 frogs on a log. And I'm like, sitting there, I'm like, well, that's different. Okay, let's go through this. He's like, so you got 3 frogs on a log. One decides to jump. How many frogs are left? You said 2? Is that what we say? Yeah, you think 2. He's like, no. Making decisions, not taking action. So you made a decision to come in this gym, join the gym, and change your life, but you haven't taken action yet. We need to take action. You need to do personal training today. We need to sign up, and I'll change your life. And I was like, well, that's different. So now put it in your perspective. How many times in your life, in this church or in any church that you've been in, have you decided to go and try to do something, be more involved, but you just didn't take action? In your mind, and you feel God pulling you to do these things. In my world, so everybody knows that when I was in California, I did Celebrate Recovery. That was the biggest thing and it changed a lot of my perspective, right? I played worship with them. I went to men's groups with them. I was very close-knit with that group. And over the past few months, I feel God pulling me to go back into that, and I haven't done it. And I know that the more that I don't do the things he's asking me to do, and this is why this message is where it came from, the more I don't do those things, I feel myself just slowly inching away. And then I notice that I'm doing things that I shouldn't be doing and having habits come back that shouldn't be there. And it's all because I decided to go to California or to Florida. And at one point I decided to change my life by going through Celebrate Recovery. And I know that that's what works, is because the more involved you are in your church, the more involved you are with the people of your church, and the more people that you surround yourself with, the closer you're going to be to God. It's just the way it works. But Florida, I'll find every excuse and every reason not to do it. Right? So in this story here, Ananias still had to decide to go. He could have not went. He could have just been like, no, I'm not doing that. Or I'm going to be like Jonah. I'm going to try to run. How you would try to run from God is beyond me, but he tried, right? So in our life, many times we go through the same thing. When I get into talking about fitness and I talk to people about the gym, right? People are like, well, how do you stay in such good shape? You're pushing 40. How do you keep the weight off? And I'm like, well, what do you eat? You must eat really clean. And I'm like, no, I'm not perfect. I I like pizza and I like other things. I was like, but I understand moderation. But I have a regiment and I stick to it. Whereas many people, when they decide to join the gym and they decide to do those things, they have all these grand ideas, and then they get in there and they realize that it's freaking hard. Like, it's not an easy thing to do. It takes discipline, and it takes a lot of things that some people aren't willing to give up. And they don't reach those goals because it's not easy. It's a lot easier maintaining it once you get there than it is getting there. And the process that you go through when God asks you to do something, a lot of times is not going to be easy. You're going to be walking through some hard things in life. Just being a Christian doesn't make you life better. I mean, you learn to be content, as Paul did when he was, thrown into prison, and he was talking in Philippians, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. He learned to be content in any situation he was in. But his life was not easy, right? And he was one of the greatest disciples of all time. So if he had it hard, what makes you think that your life should be super easy because you decide to follow God? Especially in today's world. Today's world, it's much different, right? So number 3 is we have to take action. Like, we have to understand that there's some things that'll stop you from doing that, though, right? And a lot of times it's fear. Like, you're scared. You're scared to take action because you might have to give up time or resources, or you might have to give up whatever your normal, typical comfort schedule is, that you have to give that up. But at the same time, comfort does not breed growth. All right? So the more comfortable you are sitting in those seats, and just sitting in those seats, that's not growing anything, right? Because you're too comfortable. You want to grow, you need to get uncomfortable. So how I do that is, and in the gym, and I relate to this because that's my work, right? In the gym, it's the same way. If you did the same workout every day for the rest of your life, eventually your body, the way it works is it's an adaptive machine, and it will adapt to what you're doing, and it will stop making progress because you don't change things up and you don't put yourself in uncomfortable situations that are difficult. How you do that is you change the program and you put them into different types of workouts that are just going to challenge them a little differently. In this world, it's the same way. If you feel yourself getting to the point where you're drifting away, it's probably because you got comfortable, right? So a lot of times, what keeps us from taking action is comfort. The other thing, and I was listening to Stephen Furtick the other day. I'm sure a lot of you guys listen to his services and stuff. He's Elevation Church. They do a lot of worship songs and stuff. But he said this thing that was really cool. A lot of times our feelings will keep us from taking action. And he said, don't let your mood be your master, which I thought was a really good line. Like, don't let your mood be your master, meaning just because you don't feel good that day, or just because you might be a little irritated that day, don't let that stop you from doing the things God's asking you to do. The other way he said it was, don't let your feelings be your Pharaoh, right? Just because you don't like what somebody said, don't let that stop you from doing the things God is asking you to do. Just because you don't like how somebody operates, or how somebody sings a worship song, or how Ray delivers a message, or whoever. And if it hits you in the heart, that's probably because you need to hear it. Amen. Right? So don't let your feelings be your Pharaoh. Just because you feel like, you don't feel good about it, if God's asking you to do it, and he's telling you to get out there and get more involved, you got to make room and do it. All right? You got to be adaptive. You got to put yourself in uncomfortable situations. All right? Going from there, the next thing we look at is control. So a lot of times people won't take action because they don't like to give up control. So Vanessa, my wife, you guys have met her. She is 15 years in the Marine Corps, much more organized than I am, and she is like on top, like super organized, like everything. Like if I go to buy something, I have to essentially, like if it's something over a certain amount, I have to draw up a plan of how this is going to work. And it's got to be like, I have to research prices, I have to research when it's going to be paid out. It has to be this detailed thing that I present to her, because otherwise she's not going to listen to me. She's just like, no. Because she has to control situations. That's the world that she lives in. How many of you are like that? That you feel like you have to control everything, and that's why you don't want to do some of the things that God asks you to do, because you're like, no, then I got to give up control. I don't want to do that. Why? Because that's scary. Right? If you don't control the situation, that's scary. It's like getting in the car with Cassidy and driving at night. I sit in that car and I'm like, I have no control over this. Like I could die here. That's for real. I love her, but man. And even in the daytime, it's not much better. But at nighttime, yeah, it's rough. So you guys have ridden with her, Everybody knows, yeah. So where's Cass? There she is, yeah. So my little sister back there, yeah, sure, her driving skills could use some work. But it makes you nervous because you have no control over the situation. I'm sitting over there and she's doing things and I'm like, man, I don't normally get nauseous in a car, but this is rough, right? Yeah, well, Thomas tells me the story that day. He's like, yeah, we're driving around. He was like, and you guys know Thomas. Thomas works on cars. He works on hot rods. He drives very fast vehicles, so he's used to all that. He gets in the car with her, and he said he got sick and had to throw up. And I'm like, we love you, Cass. Sorry, I'm not gonna. But he has no control, so he just got to ride it out, right? So anyway. And then once you get past that point where you're like, okay, I'm going to take action, and you start taking action, the only way that you can do that is to understand that you're going to have to sacrifice things. There are things in your life you're going to have to give up to get to that point, right? You can't just expect things to be given you and blessings to come if you don't expect to also sacrifice at the same time. It's just like, it's like a marriage, right? When you go into marriage and you understand that love is not a feeling, it's not something like, that honeymoon thing, that lasts for a little bit. And then after that, you have to make an effort for love for a while before things will kind of smooth out, right? And then you'll start to learn each other, and then things will get, but it's really uncomfortable for a while because you have to learn that in a marriage or in a relationship, you have to sacrifice. You have to sacrifice time. Your schedule is going to be different, especially when you start throwing kids in there. It gets real crazy. Like one's rough, two gets a little, but then when you throw the third one, it's essentially like, like you're trying to wade in the water and like you're having a hard time swimming and somebody throws you a brick. That's what the third one is. That's the brick. And you're just like, screw it. I'm done. You're just going to let them run amok now, right? But you have to sacrifice a lot of the things that you are selfish with, right? Has anybody ever come across that where maybe you didn't make that sacrifice? And what happens? Something happens, then you always look back on that. That's something you always think about. It's like, I could have done more. I could have done something different. I definitely could have been more involved, right? But you weren't willing to make the sacrifice, and because of that, again, those blessings won't come. Now, God says He never said that at any point that this life is going to be easy, right? And it's not. There's a lot of times, and there's a lot of times where you question things, and you should. But you have to understand that ultimately, if you want blessings, sacrifice is going to be a part of that. If you look at right here in Acts chapter 9, verse 16, I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. And he's talking about Paul there. So Paul, like he's telling Ananias that I know that he came hard against you guys. Paul's about to suffer. He's about to sacrifice a lot of things. But what does Ananias suffer in this story? Could be a lot. So it could be his life that he's sacrificing to go and pray for this man, and that's what he's thinking in his mind, but he goes anyway. He questions it at first, but then eventually he goes, right? But it could be a lot of other things too. What else would he sacrifice in this situation? Friends? People that don't want to be associated with somebody that's about to go do something crazy. It's like, you're going to go I don't want to be associated with you. I don't want anybody coming after me. Forget that. I don't know you anymore, right? And so he could sacrifice that. He could sacrifice a lot of things in his life because he's about to go do something God asked him to do that is borderline insane, right? So when we're looking at that, we have to understand that that's just part of the process. You're going to sacrifice in life, just like you sacrifice in your relationship or your marriage. And if you didn't, that marriage probably it probably didn't pan out the way you wanted it to because you weren't willing, you were too selfish, and you weren't willing to sacrifice your time. Maybe it's your resources. Maybe it's, I don't know, it could be anything, right? But you can't complain about things if you're not taking action and willing to sacrifice to make them better. Cool? So how does this work on the other side? So we've got Ananias who initially he comes in and he's, told to do something. He's like, but Dad, I don't know about that. So he questions God to start with. Eventually goes, and what happens to Paul? He prays for Paul. The scales fall from his eyes, and his eyes are open to a whole new world at that point. Right? And he's no longer the same Saul that was there before. Okay? So that's Ananias' side. But then let's take the same process and look at Paul. So Saul goes down the road to Damascus. In the middle of that, Jesus comes to Saul, and what does he do? He said, why are you persecuting me? Why? Why are you coming after my people? Like, what did we do to you? And he's like, who are you? He didn't even know who he was. He's like, I'm the one you're persecuting. I'm the Lord that you're persecuting. And meanwhile, the people that are around him, they're hearing it, but they see nothing. So they're like, what is going on right now? They're probably thinking, this is crazy. And then, so what happens? Paul hits his knees, goes blind, And at that point, he has to make a decision because God's like, hey, you need to go into Damascus, and this guy's going to pray for you. But he also had to suffer. He went 3 days, without eating or drinking. So he was suffering there, but he had to make a decision to go. He could have been like, I'm losing my mind. I probably just need to go back and have somebody medically look at me because there's no way I'm hearing what I'm hearing. Like, this doesn't even make sense. God never talked to me before. This is crazy, right? And I just went blind all of a sudden. Something up here has got to be screwed up. So he could have went back, but he never said but. He was just like, they just gathered him up and took him, right? So that's where, but what does Paul sacrifice? So he had to take action. He had to decide to listen to this voice that came out of nowhere and blinded him, and he had to, it could have been anything. But he had to decide to take action and actually go. But then what does he have to sacrifice? How did Paul grow up? Right? He grew up on one side that was very strict, that was persecuting Christians, that he thought he was doing the right thing. How many people did he put in prison or allow to be stoned? I mean, I think it was Stephen was one of them, right? Yeah, where he just watched. How many? So what does he have to? He has to sacrifice that whole life and the families and all the people that he's known, because now he's going to go a different path, a path where he was. How hard is that going to be? That you were the one going around murdering all my friends and all my family, and now you want to be a brother. How hard is that going to be for other people to accept that, man? Right? That's a difficult thing to do. But if you look across his life, what else happens to Paul through his life? So if we look through here, he was flogged 5 times. So that's suffering, right? And Jesus said in that same thing, he's going to suffer. It's going to happen. What else? Shipwrecked 3 times. Had the thorn in his side, which nobody really knows what that is. There's a lot of thoughts out there, but I mean, nobody really knows definitively what that is. But we know that he asked multiple times to have that removed. And God said no. Why? Maybe it kept him humble, right? Because at the end of the day, like, he was a very high up person before that happened. And humility probably wasn't something that was part of his nature, right? Because he thought he was better than most. He was doing God's work. So he thought, right? So if you take him through that same process, he had a little different path that he took. So what are we going to do today? Like, what are we going to start doing moving forward? Are we going to continue to sit in the seat and not listen to what God has to say and not maybe take action and go do the things that we know we're supposed to do? I know I have to make some changes personally. I have to start going back and doing the things that I was doing before, because I definitely felt the gap starting to pull. Right? And when you feel that, other things in your life just start to shift and start to change. Doesn't mean that it's easier or harder. For me, it's not easier or harder, but it's in your heart. You know something's wrong. Why? Because you decided not to listen. You decided not to sacrifice. And eventually, God's going to stop telling you what to do. Because at some point, he's going to be like, look, I've told you multiple times. It's kind of like, you ever hear that story about the person on the top of the roof that was waiting and praying to God? It was like flooding, and they were praying, and God, come save me. God, come save me, right? And then a boat comes by, and he's like, hey, do you need a ride? The floodwaters are getting rough. He's like, no, God's got me. I'm gonna be good. Then he keeps praying, and then another boat comes by, same thing happens. And eventually the waters get too high, and he drowns. Gets to heaven. He's like, God, I thought you were going to save me. I prayed hard. He's like, I sent you 2 boats. You're the one that didn't get on them. So that's up to you, right? I tried to save you. How many times does that happen? Because we think something's just going to happen. Like, I'm going to pray, and then it's just going to happen. Yet, I don't take action. I don't do anything. I don't do any work. You expect things to happen without doing work. That's the world we live in now. Is, what do they call those participation trophies now? Where you just go and do something, you get a trophy, and everybody feels good about it, but you didn't win anything. You could lose every game of the whole season. You still get a trophy. That's crazy. It doesn't make any sense to me. Why? Because that breeds that thought process of, I don't really have to work that hard to still get rewarded. But that's not true in this world, right? Meaning, in this world, if you don't put the effort in, if you don't do the things God's asking you to do, your reward's probably not going to be the same as some of the people that you look around. And even those that don't look like they get that much, but they have that peace. Like you see, and they have a stressful situation, or they have something that just goes all out of whack, and they don't freak out. They're just powering through that. That's more of a reward than the material things. Like the song we sung earlier, that Sometimes song. Me and Dad wrote that song. And we wrote that song thinking about how often do people value their material things over just staying on their knees and staying grounded and understanding that God is going to help you to go through situations and have peace and be content. And that's more valuable than the car that you're praying for over and over again that you don't want to work for. You just expect God to put in your lap, right? It doesn't happen that way. You want this church to grow, but how many of you actually get up and try to get it to grow? So it doesn't just happen. It's not just going to pop off out of nowhere. Can the Holy Spirit move? Yes, but that requires other people to get involved in it. He's not just going to move for no reason, right? You have to be involved. And if just sitting in that seat is not going to do it. I'm telling you that because I sit at my house and I'm in the same situation sometimes where I'm like, the reason why that we've had some struggles and we've had some issues going on is because I was not moving in that path, and being the man in the house, that's your job as the man in the house, is you spiritually, you were supposed to lead that house. If you're not doing that, guess what happens to all the others? Right? They start to realize that, oh, this isn't really as important as they made it seem, right? Because it's not really part of the everyday life. It's not really part of the everyday conversation. So is it really as important as they say? No. It's not important if you're not constantly bringing it up and working towards getting better at it. So again, I'm leaving you with this. And we can look through a couple things, but if we go to, can you pull up Romans 12:1 for me, Patty? I could just flip over there, but. So, dear brothers and sisters, is that right? I plead with you to give your body to, there we go. So, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. All right? And by giving your body, that means giving, that's a lot of things that you're giving. Time, resources, commitment, right? Discipline. All those things are things that you have to sacrifice, and you have to hand those things over. Otherwise, you're going to stay in the same situation because you never put yourself in that uncomfortable situation. Does that make sense? So what are we going to do? Are we going to continue going down the same path? Or are we going to start getting together and start figuring out how to move in one path and everybody get involved? Because that's really what's going to make the difference. Right? And if you're a person who's still struggling with being saved, it's the same thing. You have to take action. At some point, you have to make the decision, but you have to take action. But you also have to understand that the sacrifice is real. The struggle can be real sometimes. Being a Christian does not mean it's easy. So this is not one of those sermons where we talk about how great everything is, because sometimes it's not. I've, over the past 2 years now, I've had more people that I was close to in my life pass away than the first 35 years. Right? And meaning close to like friends, family, people like that, Dad, Ronald, and I can go on with a couple more. And that's tough. That's a hard thing. So, and I could ask questions all day long on why did this happen to me? Why does this go on? Why is God doing this? God's not doing that. Right? You're going to struggle in life. It's in here. It's going to happen. How you take that struggle and stay grounded, that's up to you. That's what constantly builds that relationship that you have with God. Because if you don't, then you're going to start separating and things the glue's not there. So that's the difference. Doesn't mean you're going to have all these material things. Get that out of your head. You've got to work for those. God doesn't just hand those to you. You've got to put some effort in. It's the way it is. But it's the same way with growing this church. You've got to put some effort in, right? Going out and doing some volunteer work. If they're going to do a volunteer weekend, well, take a Saturday off and go do it. Right? There was nothing more rewarding, I can promise you this. All the material things in the world are not going to reward you as much as doing something for somebody else, as blessing somebody else. And that doesn't have to be financially. Sometimes it is. Sometimes God will tell you, hey, go give this person this, go do this for this person. And that happens. It happens in my life quite a bit sometimes. But sometimes it's just, hey, go help this person clean up their house. Hey, go help this person with landscaping. It could be anything like that. But you gotta, if you're not grounded and you're not listening, you're not going to hear those things. There goes the blessings, right? If you want value in life, it's not through material things. It's through sacrifice and doing things for other people. That's also how you grow this church, getting out in the community and sacrificing. What Ray and Doug did for the clinic up in Camden and raising all that money to get that, I mean, I didn't even know that until I was talking to Doug the other day, and I was like, that's sacrifice, that's work, and that's amazing work. And if you weren't involved in that, please talk to one of those two guys and figure out when those things happen, get involved, because that leaves an impression on your heart, but it also leaves an impression to where as you're walking through this community, people see an example of what true love is and what God really is. Okay? Make sense? I love you guys. I really do. So if it comes across a little hard sometimes, I'm not meaning it that way. It's just, I have my own struggles in my life, and I thought maybe that this would help somebody in here that's struggling with similar things. You know, that maybe you got a little too far from God. Maybe you stopped listening and stopped doing the things that really got you to a point where you were content, but the problem is maybe you got too content. And sometimes that happens when you stop putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, and then the gap starts, and before you know it, you're looking back like, what did I just do with the last 6 to 12 months that was worth anything other than working? Yeah, it pays the bills, but what did I do that was worth anything that helped anybody else out? Not much. That's not the life we want to live. That's not the life we're called to live. Amen? Ray, you want to close this out in prayer?
Before I do, I want to clarify something. Next Sunday, we are having baptism, right? We are still going to be grilling food, so bring your